Hi, this time I wanted to talk about two things. Yesterday I uploaded a video that got me thinking about my start when it comes to the tabletop RPG hobby. So I thought it would be a good idea to share my thoughts on when it comes to mapping in tactical tabletop role-playing games. In those role-playing games where you have rules when it comes to templates, areas of effect, attacks of opportunity, etc. How to handle mapping, because it reminded me of some less than smooth or potentially clumsy moments in my past when it comes to running tabletop RPGs. And it also got me thinking about the concept of theater of the mind, if it's actually adequately applied, the theater of the mind. So that last part is going to focus on that and that is the last part, the second half of this video. It's going to be my thoughts on that and an open question to know your thoughts about certain things that I do not agree with when it comes to the way that the theater of the mind concept is applied. Not the method of the theater of the mind itself, but rather the application of the definition. Okay, let's start with this thing about mapping tactical tabletop RPGs. Let's go back to my beginnings when I started to learn how to play Advanced Dungeons and Dragons 2nd edition with the introductory box set. Back then, of course, internet was not a thing yet. It was very difficult for you to learn how to play tabletop role-playing games. In my case, I had to rely completely on the box set. You may remember that in my story of my first RPG session that was quite horrible. I'm going to put a link in the description to that video. If you haven't seen it, check it out. Okay. So when I first started to actually make some attempts at playing a tabletop role-playing game using Advanced Dungeons and Dragons 2nd edition, it was pretty easy with the box set. You had your adventure, you had this paper map to play the adventure, so it was very easy for someone who had only played video games and board games to make that transition. So I was playing with my group and everything was pretty cool, you know. I was like role-playing Bone Nasher, one of the bosses, stomping forward. The ground shakes with every step. This is Bone Nasher's domain, surrender! It was really cool. And then we got to the second adventure, and then we got to the third one. The third adventure, as I mentioned, is kind of like a weaker or toned down version of Undermountain, but I couldn't find a map. It was jarring for me because you had the two maps for the other two adventures, but there was no third map. You only had the map in the booklet that was included, but I was like, is there an error here? Is there a map missing? But no, it's supposed to be that way. The box set only contains the first two maps for the first two adventures, the previous two adventures, but the third one there is no map. And they give you, that's a flaw of the box set, they give you no indication of how to make that transition. You were used to playing things with your miniatures and your paper maps, so I didn't understand. They told you, oh, you can make your map on a piece of paper. So I thought, but do I need to like buy a huge piece of paper, like this thing, graph paper, to use as a map? Or do you write things down on a smaller scale? Like you have your notebook and you start to make your map over there, but then how do I make the smooth transition from that to the tactical aspect using miniatures to better understand the nuances of battle? So yes, the first attempts were quite clumsy. We actually purchased this huge, well, you know, the typical bond paper. We were using it as a map / battle mat. Back then we didn't have battle mats everywhere. That became popular, in my opinion, with Pathfinder 1st edition. That's when using those dry erase mats became, like, it became popular. But back then, like I said, I purchased my bond paper. We had our pencils and erasers, And we started to map the entire thing on the huge sheet of paper. But it took so long. But that was not the problem. You actually ended up with a really cool looking map. Sadly, they did not survive the passage of time. I think it would have been great if I had taken better care of them. It would have been like a nice memento of the adventure. But the problem was that there were many instances within that adventure where there wasn't a need to handle some tactical representations. Not all of the rooms had battles. Those that had battles, some of those battles could be avoided. In fact, it was the fighter, a druid, and a cleric. They were quite cautious because they entered this room with carrion crawlers, and one of them died. His character was a fighter wizard, elf fighter wizard, got killed in that room, ended up being devoured by the carrion crawlers. The other two players had to abandon him because they had this paralyzation ability, of course, and they started to avoid that room. The player created a new character, a cleric, and so they were quite cautious, avoiding things, trying to get enemies into ambushes. They were more methodical. So because of their careful approach, they approached things as if it was a real life situation. In real life, when you go into hostile environments, you're not going to be just running around like crazy. You're going to be very careful because you only have one life to live. And even though there is resurrection in Dungeons and Dragons, it was quite expensive, especially at those levels of experience. The average character at that, it was between 3rd and 5th level, if I'm not mistaken. It wasn't exactly cheap to purchase the resurrection services. So what bothered me about that is that there were many moments where you simply didn't need a map. Only in those tactical situations, you have this necromancer and these two zombies and he's going to use this spell and you need to be careful because as you are moving through the area there are some unstable zones where you can actually step on those zones and you fall down and you take damage. So it was very exciting, but like I said, those instances were not always happening. And later on, as I got into Ravenloft, then I started to figure out that in many occasions you do not need to map everything. At least when it comes to a tactical RPG scale, that is, you can map everything. In fact, I would recommend that you map everything, but with some simple notes, smaller maps on your smaller sheet of paper or notebook or whatever. And so it is my recommendation. Perhaps there are some people that have just gotten into the hobby, or some people that have always handled everything when it comes to mapping in a larger scale tactical way, that when it comes to the descriptions of the rooms, you handle everything loosely, just writing things down with a few notes. Don't try to, well, unless you enjoy it, don't try to map the entire thing using dungeon tiles or drawing everything on a dry erase mat or a wet erase. Maybe you prefer it like that. There is no need for that, and it may slow play beyond what is acceptable for you and your group. But like I said, the key lies in that it's about what you enjoy. If you have like those very elaborate tiles, like, how would you call them, the Dwarven Forge type of pieces, or maybe you with the 3D printers, it's quite common for players to print those pieces of the dungeon. If you want to create your miniature dungeon as you're moving along, that's fine, perfect, that's great. But in my case, I enjoy that the players make simple maps, and I just start to describe things. That's what I wanted to talk about in the theater of the mind. We will get to that in a few moments. It's much better to give some loose descriptions. So for example, they go into this living room and you can say something that as you enter the room, you notice there is a fireplace on the east wall. In the northeast corner, there is a statue, what seems to be the statue of a werewolf. There is a huge cushioned chair facing the wall on the southwestern side. And that's it. If those are the only things in the room, and maybe like a carpet in the middle, don't map things, don't map it don't map it all immediately. If there isn't going to be a fight, just let it like that. And then the players, that's enough, more than enough when it comes to details for the players to interact with that room. That way the players can say something like, okay, I want to walk around carefully to see what's on the other side of the cushion, the chair. I actually had that in one instance. One of my players was quite suspicious of this chair that was facing a wall. They thought that there was perhaps this, like a small enemy, like a goblin or leprechaun, or even a larger enemy. Perhaps they were saying something like, okay, I want to look under the chair to see if I can see some legs. And I told them, no, you don't see any legs. And the other guys were like, wait, maybe there is like a goblin or a leprechaun or gremlin. Or maybe it's someone is lifting his legs so we cannot see them under the chair. And they were already drawing their weapons to assassinate anything that was behind that chair, that is sitting on the chair facing the wall. But there was nothing there. I just placed it like that to unnerve them. But it was, like I said, it's kind of like a trope of my adventures. I actually enjoy using smaller enemies, hiding them in cupboards and closets, and they just jump out and slash at them. The logic is that they hear the characters coming. Well, in case they fail, if they are stealthy and they fail their roll or whatever, and so the enemy prepares for them. They want to ambush them by hiding in closets and all of that. So that's really fun. So, but like I said, there wasn't a battle happening yet. Let's say that I actually decided to play a smaller enemy in that chair. Until the enemy starts to attack, then if you are playing a tactical RPG, then set up your map, your dungeon tiles, or like I said, maybe, or you only use like, I have like this clear sheet of acetate. I think it's called like that in English. You know, typical clear sheet with a grid. In fact, just like points in this, separating each square. And I just place it, in case there is no need for a greater representation, I just place it on the table, and you put like a few tokens to represent, oh, here's the chest, here's a table, and then battle happens, and that's it. But I also enjoy, like I said, in more important battles, I like bringing out dungeon tiles and using some like furniture, if I have like miniatures that represent the furniture, all of that. I enjoy that, and my players also enjoy that. It's all about your enjoyment. But as a general recommendation, if you are not going to have battles, if battles do not happen yet, do not start to place, to map everything out on the table using your dungeon tiles, dungeon pieces, dry erase mats or maps or whatever. Just handle it, as they call it, theater of the mind, but I will talk about that in a few moments. And you can also, even if there are traps, you can also handle it like that. If you know that there is a trap placed in front of a chest, and the player just tells you like, I approach the chest and open it, but he's going to walk into that trap, unless he says something like, I'm going to open the chest from the side, and you're like, almost had him, right? So yes, everything can be handled when it comes to the theater of the mind. It's things proceed a bit more smooth, but when it comes to battles, if you want to enjoy that tactical experience, I definitely recommend that you set up things. It's all about what you like. Now let's talk about the theater of the mind. I think this is actually incorrectly applied. I will tell you why. When someone says theater of the mind, it gets me thinking. So you have like this play happening, like a stage play. If you have a theater of the mind, do you have the audience of the mind? So not every tabletop role-playing game is going to resemble or represent some sort of play, like a theatrical play. Not every role-playing game is going to represent a movie or an episode or an anime, a manga, comic book, real life. It's all about what you want and the sort of RPG that you are playing. I got into this line of thinking because I go back to every moment where I play, for example, Dungeons and Dragons, and I never look at things as if it was some sort of movie. It feels like as if it's real. It's something that is happening. There is no theater. It is real life in a fictional context, so to speak. The representation of reality in fiction. So there's no theater. I think it's better to call it, you can play it with the mind's eye. You are looking at things with the mind's eye. There is no theater. But like I said, it's all about what you want to represent. There are systems that specialize in representing like films, others that have these manga or anime tropes, like I said, the comic book ones, etc. I think players that, yes, people that play role-playing games such as Hardmaster, Rolemaster, Hackmaster, every master game, or yes, let's say Legend Quest, all of those simulationist style of role-playing games, I don't think, in most cases, I don't think that they see things as if it was a movie or a TV series or so. They look at it as if it, oh, this is real life, but in a fantasy context. And of course with some time skips, because you're not going to be role-playing when the character, when he is going to the bathroom or taking a shower. There are some logical skips, but it still feels more like, oh, I'm living in this, like a second life in fiction. So those are my thoughts. I want to know your thoughts about the theater of the mind, the thing. And of course also about mapping. How much do you map your adventures? Do you enjoy mapping everything? That is placing tiles, and maybe you have, like I said, your huge mats to map the entire dungeon. Do you only map some instances? I know that a lot of you prefer to discard miniatures and maps, but when it comes to those that enjoy the tactical RPG, a role-playing game, because there's also a game here, there is not only roleplay, there is also a game. If you enjoy that aspect, let me know your thoughts about how you handle mapping. And of course, when it comes to the theater of the mind, do you agree with this? Do you think that theater of the mind is the right way of putting it, or just the mind's eye? We play it using the mind's eye. Let me know your thoughts. So thank you once again for watching this video. Thank you for your likes and your comments. If you have any other questions or comments, please let me know. And thank you so much to those of you that are going the extra mile to support the channel. If anyone else wishes to further support the channel, the information on how to do that will be in the description below. Once again, thank you, and see you later.